Arturo Schwarz kommer att prata om sin relation till Marcel Duchamp. Och vi har alla möjlighet att ställa frågor. I'm so happy and so honored that you come all the way to Stockholm. Thank you for this. I want to thank Galerie Bellar and Belenius for helping with this unbelievable, surprising visit. There's an exhibition right now at Bellar called Marcel Duchamp Sverige, Marcel Duchamp Sweden. And it's actually quite interesting that there were so many artists who knew Duchamp, and there were many who were influenced, but actually a few Swedish artists who knew Duchamp quite well. However, that's not the theme for today. The theme today is Arturo Schwarz's relationship to Marcel Duchamp. And I asked a slightly awkward question just a few minutes ago, so you knew him very well now, and the answer was, well, I worked together for 20 years with Mr. Duchamp, so clearly yes. Arturo Schwarz is a legend in many ways. For us who are even vaguely interested in modern art, we have come across the name in so many different contexts, but for me it's closely linked to the artist that we're going to talk about, Marcel Duchamp, and to this book which is here on the table, The Complete Works of Marcel Duchamp. However, Arturo Schwarz has written about many other artists and also about other things that are maybe linked to Marcel Duchamp and some of his friends like Man Ray, etc. But he's written a book on Kabbalah, and he's been interested in alchemy, and he also writes his own poetry. So there are many other things to talk about. But today's talk, with interruptions perhaps from us and from you if you want, does it have a title? I think the title is My Relationship, I know I invent this, My Relationship to Marcel Duchamp.
Okay.
It's acceptable. I'm so happy you're here, and I'll stop speaking and I'll just say welcome.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who is here for having come. I would like to say first of all that there are an enormous number of misconceptions concerning the two most important works of Marcel Duchamp. That is to say, the Readymades and the large glass that you see there reproduced. For anybody who wants to know the significance of both the Readymades and of the large glass, the best thing to do is to go directly to the sources. That is to say, to what Duchamp himself has most clearly explained in a series of notes that were published, the first series, in 1934, under the title that is almost the same as that of the large glass, but without a comma. The title of the green box, as it has come to be known for short, is The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelor's Even. The title of the large glass has only one difference with this one. After the word bachelors, it has a comma. So it reads, The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelor, comma, men. Now, in French, because the work is of course titled most certainly in French, men is a homophone for men written. The first men is written M, E with a circumflex accent, E. And that means even or also. But men written M apostrophe A-I-M-E means loves me. not accidental. In this mem, loves me, is the whole theme of the large glass. But I want to revert to the large glass a little bit later, because there is one more argument that infuriates me literally, which concerns the Readymades. People think, and when I say people, I also refer to very well-known art so-called historians or art so-called critics who have never taken the trouble to read, at least to just read, I don't say study, that I have done, but just to read the notes that Duchamp wrote about the Readymades that are in the collection that I quoted before, the Green Box or the Bright Street Bell by Bachelor's even. There is also a second collection of notes that were published much later in the late 1960s by Cordier Ekstrom, I believe, which is called the Boîte Blanche, with another series of notes. The second series of notes only confirm and expand the information that one can gather from the first series of notes. What does Duchamp has to say about the Readymades? Let's take the trouble to read what he says, not what I say, or what an art historian or an art critic says. What he says. First of all, Duchamp established 4 strict rules for elevating a common object to the rank of a work of art. Let me, before saying which are the 4 rules, remind you one thing. That when Duchamp decided not to abandon paintings as you read everywhere, but to change his way of expressing himself through art, temporarily choosing other ways of expression, he had reached the summum of the craftsmanship involved in painting a work of art, with the painting of the Virgin, the Bride, and the works of the nudes descending the staircase. He had realized that in this direction nothing else could be done, at least by himself. And as he said himself in an interview in 1914, remember the date, 1914, not 1965 or so, 1914. He said, I am tired of pure retinal painting, that is to say that paintings that appeal only to the eye. I am interested in a conceptual work of art. And that is the reason why he abandoned temporarily, I repeat, because in 1946, when he tackled the second most important physical work of his life, which is, étant donné le gaz d'éclairage et l'illumination, it is this environment that you find in Philadelphia, which is something immeasurably beautiful. And you have here, in this very room, the enormous chance to see in its first expression the bride that you see in this room. Here it is, for you to see there. You see this torso of woman? Now this, you see it all? Now this is the central figure of the second environment that you find in Philadelphia, where it is life-size, obviously three-dimensional, surrounded by unequivocal objects that specify who is this woman. Physically, that's the only thing I'm going to say about it now. I want to refer it later. But just for the sake of the sincere truth, physically, this woman is Maria Martins, a woman with whom Duchamp had a very close relationship for many years, from the late 40s to the early 50s. She was the wife of a Brazil ambassador for Brazil, and their love, reciprocal, was indeed very deep. So the torso that you see there is really the torso of Maria Martins. But there is one little detail, that the torso has no pubic hair, and that means that it refers not only to Maria Martins, but to a young girl. And this young girl, as I will explain later, and this has provoked a great deal of confusion, of my being accused by Richard Hamilton, for instance, of having desecrated Duchamp. This young girl was Suzanne, the sister of Duchamp, with whom there was an entirely unconscious love relationship. I have explained this again and again in my book, that it was entirely unconscious and that it has as its archetype the alchemical brother-sister pair and the mythological brother-sister pair. This incestuous relationship, which I repeat for the millionth time, but people always ignore this and accuse me of being a pornographer, of having accused Duchamp of whatever sexual crimes, was, and both Freud and Jung explained it very well with the concept of the id, and for Jung the concept of the collective unconscious. It depends on the deeper layers of our psyche. Nobody is responsible for the deeper layers of our psyche. This is the result of an evolution that took man 500 million of years. Forget the fables of the Bibles and all this rubbish. Man is the result of the evolution of a physiological organism that lasted 500 million of years. Homo habilis, Homo instrumentis, Homo sapiens, and finally Homo sapiens sapiens. This 500 million years of evolution has left with each one of us the collective unconscious, which is the accumulation of all the psychic experience that we have gone through 500 million years. We were not born yesterday. We were born 500 million years ago, and we dragged this inheritance, even physiologically, in our brain. There is a part of our brain that anatomists refer to as the most ancient part of the human organism, which goes back to hundreds of thousands of years. But now let's go back to our text, and let's go back especially to the Readymades. I said, and I apologize for this long interruption, I said that Duchamp established 4 rules. The first one was to decontextualize the ready-made. A perfect example. You can see a bicycle wheel, and you imagine obviously that it's part of a bicycle. But with Duchamp it's not so. He took a stool and placed the bicycle wheel on the stool, and thus displaced it, tore it away from its context. So the first rule for elevating a work of art to the status of, to elevate a common object, a ready-made object, to the status of a work of art is to decontextualize it, to take out of its context and to present it to us under a new light. The second instance is the bottle rack. The bottle rack is not resting on the ground. It is to be suspended on the wall. Another example, but I will come to it later, another dictation, another prerequisite for a common object to be elevated to the work of art was to give it a title. Now the first 2 were not given a title, but from then on, for instance, for the snow shovel, it was called In Advance of the Broken Arm. Now I want to say just one word about it, but which is needed. In Sanskrit, the word lingam, which refers to this instrument, is also the same word as the penis. And a broken penis is a castrated penis, a castrated man. So In Advance of the Broken Arm really wants to point out to the punishment that incestuous males receive, that is to say, to be castrated. So the title is far from being accidental. The third condition that Duchamp imposed upon himself was to avoid a repetition. Duchamp hated to repeat himself. This is why each of his work is so different from another, But at the same time, each of its work illustrates the same theme, that of the bachelor or that of the bride. So, the third condition was to limit the number of ready-mades per year. And in fact, between 1913 and 1921, when there was the last ready-made or semi-ready-made made, which was the Fresh Widow, which again is a pun on the word fresh and French, because the window is really a French window. That's how they call this kind of windows. But it was a fresh window, which means fresh, audacious, not very strictly, let's say, bourgeois. And then there was a fourth condition, which is more elusive. But which reflects perfectly the constant attitude of Duchamp of being totally not committal. I don't say neutral, I say non-committal. And that was that between the object and himself, there was something to be known as a rendezvous. That is to say, in time and space, the artist and the object that he wanted to transform into a work of art had to meet. These four conditions that I'm mentioning now, you find in the green box. Let me emphasize once again that nothing that I will say tonight has not been written by Duchamp himself in the notes he made for either the green box or for Art Infinitif. I am not inventing anything, I am not interpreting anything, because interpretations are always subject to cautions. I am just quoting a man called Marcel Duchamp, full stop. No interpretation, no hallucinations, no accusations of being a pornographer. I am quoting Marcel Duchamp. We have finished with the ready-mades. Much more to be said about it, but we cannot do anything. I want to speak to you about the large glass, which summarizes the whole emotional life of Marcel, and which has found its conclusion in the 1946-1966. It took him 20 years to achieve his second major masterwork, the environment which is at Philadelphia, that everybody could look, and symptomatically it's not open. There is a huge wood doors that bars the entry to the environment, and in it there are two holes that are blocked by two nails. Now, to look at the environment, the two nails have to be withdrawn, and then you apply your eyes to the two apertures and you can see the environment. This is a very significant detail of the nails in the holes and the fact that you cannot see the environment unless Duchamp allows you to see the environment. That is to say, gives you the permission to take out the two holes. Now, in Philadelphia, of course, the two nails are preserved, and the two holes are always open, obviously for museum reasons. Duchamp called the first half of the large glass the bride's domain, abbreviating it to the three letters Mar, M-A-R, which are the first three letters of marié. I repeat, what I am saying is in the green box. I am not inventing anything. The lower part of the large glass, which is here, he called the bachelor's domain. For briefly, he called it cell, C-E-L. Strangely enough, the conjunction of these two syllables, mar and cell, goes back to Marcel. But that's another story. The story of the puns, which was a very long verbal activity of Duchamp, which was epitomized in a publication of 1936 or 37 called Rose et la Vie, which is a collection of his puns. So let's have a close look now at this upper part of the glass and the lower glass. The first thing that you notice is this element. Now, this element is nothing else but a detail of the skeleton form of the painting of Duchamp called La Mariée. So from this, which then is repeated in another painting, Le Passage de la Vierge à la Mariée, in which you see again this element, who becomes from the young girl to a bride. Now, why on earth does Duchamp say that this mariée is hanged? Well, that was the penalty imposed upon women who had an incestuous relationship with a brother or a father. Now, what I want to make clear once again is that all the elements that compose the large glass and which were the objects of notes later were not consciously chosen. They were the product of his unconscious. Because the difference between a work dictated by the unconscious is that it is a poetical work. When something is not dictated by the unconscious, but is a literal translation of what an artist sees, then it becomes merely prosaic. So that's the narrow frontier between a work inspired by one's unconscious and one which is a literal translation of one's thought. So De Marie here is hanged, and she wants to send a message to the bachelors that are below. How does she do it? She does it through this element and the three squares that you see here. Now this, for having the shape of these three squares, Duchamp put a piece of cloth before a window and registered the movement of this piece of cloth shaped by the wind for 3 times. And this gave him the outlines of these 3 apertures that opened in what he called la nuée, that is to say, the cloud. Now, everybody knows that the cloud is an accumulation of air and water. And air is the archetypal symbol of male, while water is the archetypal symbol of the female. So again, we are pointing out to the androgynous nature of both the bride and the bachelor. We come to the bachelor very soon. So the desires of the bride are sent through the bachelor through these three apertures that continue, and here there is an element that you cannot see, but which is called the area of the 9 shots. And these 9 shots were obtained by dipping a match into paint and firing it against the large glass, leaving a dot of paint. It is in this area, which is approximately here, which you cannot see in the reproduction, but which exists in the large glass, even though has been broken, that the desires of the bride and the desires of the bachelor meet. Now let's have a look at the bachelor's domain. The first thing you see are these 9 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which represent the 9 aspects of the bachelor. They are called les 9 moules maliques, which is to say the 9 malic moles. From these malic moles, the desires of the bachelor go through the filaments that you cannot see here, but you can see in the original, lead from the 9 malic moles to the first of these 7 apertures, which are called les tamis. The desires of the bachelor go through here and splash at the bottom, and here again you cannot see them because even in the glass you don't see them, but the thing is described in the notes for the large glass, and from here they pass through, and here there is a detail of the glass which is not seen, which is the compound box. And they rise, there are here 3 circles that les témoins oculistes. Here there are 3 circles, elongated ellipses, which are called les témoins oculistes, through which the desires of the bride, of the bachelor, rise to meet the desires of. Here in this section there are the 3 oculist witnesses. That are the
almost transparent, so it doesn't.
Almost transparent, yes. Anyway, so this is the story of the large glass, which is the story of the meeting of an anxious bachelor with a bride that will never be his, and of their desires, which is an eternal love story. I want to stop now and listen to your questions, your remarks, and your objections that I will be very happy to answer. I think I spoke long enough.
Just to begin somewhere, what's the relationship between the ready-mades and the glass? Is there one?
I don't think that there is any similarity. However, the glass and the ready-mades are contemporary. because the first ready-made was in 1913, as I told you before, the bicycle way, and it is the same year as he laid down in a drawing the plan for the large glass. As a matter of fact, the large glass and the ready-mades run concurrently. I have forgotten to show you two very important elements of the large glass, which I apologize, I go back to it. There is this apparatus, which is the water mill, that is supposed to power these huge castrating scissors. But the connection is so made that you see the connections between the scissors here and the water mill. It is fixed, and therefore the scissors cannot exercise their castrating option because they cannot close. There is a second element that I have not described, and I apologize, but I do it now, and it is the chocolate grinder, which ends with a bayonet. This element is called the bayonet, by Duchamp, not by me, which supports the scissors. And these chocolate grinders, while grinding the chocolate, recite a litany, repeating that the bachelor will not beat his bride, and so on, and it repeats. And that the bachelor is engaged in an onanistic action. So these two elements again reflect the fact that the bachelor was not castrated, but was impotent. Even if he wanted to, he could not have made love with his bride, because unconsciously he is castrated. What was your question? Sorry.
No, you started talking about the ready-mades and the ideas. If there's some sort of link, if there's
no other link
inside of,
than the fact that they are synchronic. That is to say, while the whole time in which he worked for the large glass, that is to say, from about 1913 to about 1924, when he left the glass unfinished, because finishing it meant giving an end to the saga, to the story between the bachelors and the bride. So he left it unended. There are here details that he had planned, but which are not shown, obviously. But in my book you can find them in red, because there are the notes for it. One is the boxing match, which is here, and the other one is the paiement, which is up here. So they coincide, they are synchronic, but this might be accidental or not. There is no answer to the question in the notes, and therefore I don't want there to give my own interpretation. But it is a fact that when he stopped the large glass, he stopped the production of the ready-mades. So this is the connection that one can find. It is synchronic, but not thematic. Any other question, please?
One more and then the microphone will go into the
Yes.
You're careful not to talk about interpretations, and as we all know, people who are interested in Duchamp, there are infinite numbers of books applying anything that is difficult. psychoanalysis, postmodern philosophy, non-Euclidean geometry, whatever there is which is complicated, it has at some point been somehow used to try to make sense of this. Of all those different options, is there anything that you find, even if this talk is not about interpretation, it's more about explicating what he actually meant and said, is there something that you find more meaningful or more useful? I mean, I know you've been interested in alchemical
yes.
in the whole history, but
yes.
Is it...
You know, I am an anarchist, and I hate one thing above all: to impose upon somebody one's own views. Duchamp was extremely clear about his purposes in doing both the Readymades and the large glass. I have been basically greatly interested in alchemy. I have also written a word about it, a book about it. I want to make clear one thing immediately, that alchemy has nothing to do with the transformation of lead into gold. This stupid Christian alchemist, 3 centuries after the vulgar era, called usually the Christian era, I prefer to call it the vulgar era, as it is called in all scientific works. These people interpreted what in the original chemical text is called the aurum philosophorum, which means the philosophical gold, which refers to awareness, with dropping simply the word our apprehension, the word apprehension, which means the knowledge, and transforming it into gold. But the object of the alchemist is summed up in the 2 words that opened most alchemical early manuscripts, and that found in the walls of the temple of Apollo at Delphi. Gnoti sauton, know thyself. The whole object of the original alchemical quest was the knowledge of oneself. But this kind of knowledge was not to be a Platonic form of knowledge. They were not seeking knowledge for the purpose of knowledge. They were seeking knowledge for the purpose of changing oneself. You cannot change oneself unless you know thyself, you understand? That's why know thyself is the first beginning of what is the philosophical or scientific quest. You know thyself in order to be able to change yourself, in order to be able to change the world. And how do you change the world? Through chemistry, through physics, through mathematics, through looking for its springs, for its way of being. The alchemist was no other than the early scientist. The aspiration was this: to be able to know yourself in order to change yourself, in order to change the world. It has nothing to do with the transformation of lead and lead into gold, as these stupid Christians and Muslim alchemists believed. It has nothing to do. In China, which they were much more clever, Chinese alchemy never endeavored to change God into heaven. They thought instead of finding the elixir of eternal life again through the knowledge of oneself. But not this stupidity, which was after all not so stupid, because this kind of activity led to the beginnings of chemistry. So let's tip our hat to these heroic, stupid men who, notwithstanding their stupidity, opened the road to modern chemistry. I tip my hat to them. Did I answer your question?
The first part, perhaps, but not quite. Does this knowledge then help you to understand this work, or is that an irrelevant question? Is there not chemical?
Not at all. No,
there's nothing there that helps you to.
I spoke to Duchamp about alchemy, being personally so much interested in alchemy. He told me very frankly that he never was interested in alchemy, and that there is absolutely nothing alchemical in his work. Absolutely nothing. He was very, very clear about it. Just as clear as, for instance, his atheism. He did not say, I am atheist, because he said, and this I quote him in my book, I don't even want to know of such nonsense as God. Being atheist means negate God. I don't care about it. For me, the question does not even arise. There is no such thing. I'm quoting his opinion, which accidentally are also mine, but that's the second question.
That's a very good way to put it. Are there questions? Whilst you're thinking, I can say that you share, and it's unfortunate that Ulf Linde could not be here, but he shares your general skepticism of interpreting the work with the help of all these different theories.
Bullshit! One word for it. Bullshit.
However, and
I know somebody, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
He's one of the most illustrious Italian art historian, Mario Calvesi, who wrote a 500-page book proving in his ideas that Duchamp was an alchemist. That's pure bullshit. It has nothing to do. At the time, there were other theories that influenced him, but not certainly alchemists, not certainly alchemy. He speaks about them, about Poincaré and so on. He speaks about it, but it has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with alchemy. All the more since alchemy in his time, as in our time, was always usually referred to as the process to transform lead into gold. The return to the original meaning of the word alchemy was unknown to about 99.999999% of the people. Everybody, even in the dictionary, even the dictionaries, Larousse and the Oxford, say that alchemy was a primitive method to transform lead. That's bullshit. It's not at all like this. One has only, I repeat, in my own studies, I'm a PhD. If I won my PhD, is that I always went to the source themselves, never to their interpretation. Never. Never. You either go to the source or else you invent. But you cannot rely on the interpretation of the sources. That's bullshit.
Can I ask, while we're waiting for questions per plate?
Yes.
Can you estimate for us the effect of large glass on early surrealism?
Well, it has an enormous impact. André Breton, for instance, wrote in 1934 or 35 maybe, an extremely important text which was called Le Phare de la Mariée, which means le phare is how do you call phare in English? The very luminous light that leads boats into the port. Lighthouse. The lighthouse of the bride. In which he gives a very poetical interpretation of the large glass. But Duchamp and Breton were very close friends, and as a matter of fact, the most important surrealist exhibitions were devised and planned by Duchamp. For instance, the one that was in New York called 12,000 miles of string. Actually, there was only 1 mile of string, but still, it's called 12,000 miles of string, where the strings are from all sides, blocking almost the view of the works. The exhibition after the war, the first big exhibition, Eros, which was done at I think the Cordier, I don't remember now, but it doesn't matter, which was done in Paris. The setup was again, the installation was again planned by Duchamp. As a matter of fact, it goes that they are twins, Breton and his twins, Marcel Duchamp. The relationship was very, very close, because there was one thing in common which was most important. For the surrealist, which is in the first place a philosophy of life and not a technique for writing poetry or painting. Concerning painting, I must emphasize one thing. Usually one says of a painting it's surrealist when it resembles the work of Salvador Dali, who was not a surrealist. He was a surrealist for 3 years. He was just simply a very shrewd salesman of his own works, who continuously repeated them and was called for this very reason by André Breton, anagrammated his word a vida dollars. If you anagrammate the word Salvador Dali, you get a vida dollars. That was what Duchamp was. But surrealist art, the surrealist artists are always totally different from one another. Take a Miro, it has nothing to do with a Browner. Take a Browner, it has nothing to do with Yves Tanguy, and so on. Each, and this is for a very simple reason. If one is to express, according to the surrealist aesthetes, one's own unconscious, there are no two unconscious alikes. So it follows that a surrealist artist will always express himself in a way different from the other. And the best examples are the three names I have just cited. Nothing is in common between Miro, Breton, and Tanguy. And that's the same thing for all the other surrealist artists which I could name. I wrote a book about them. So drive away from your mind the fact that a surrealist painting is one that resembles the liquefactions of the forms of a merchant dealer called Salvador Dali. Drive away this notion, please. Did I answer your question?
Right on target. Right on target.
Did I answer it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because I lose sometimes. Any other questions that will be very... Yes, please.
You can have it so that people in the back can hear you.
As far as I understand, it took quite some time until Marcel Duchamp was appreciated by the general public. I believe until the 50s, his brother Jacques Dellon was considered the larger artist. So my question is, why did it take so long time for the general art society to appreciate Duchamp's contribution?
If the 20th century will go down for anything, it is for the superficiality of its thinking. It's obeying the dictates of propaganda, of merchandising. Today, there is very little independent thinking. It is much more comfortable not to strain one's brain, just to accept what everybody else accepts. Somebody who wants to evade the rules, to think with his own head, is seen as a lunatic, while he is a prophet. It's so much easier to rely on the beauty of what Duchamp called retinal painting, and not having to think about the concepts that are behind a painting. You know, it's a law of physics. Water goes from above to below because it's easier for it to fall than to rise again. And so on. In all nature, the direct path is the one that is usually taken, except in one case, since there is no finalism in the human evolution, the animal evolution, the evolution of the living organism is subject only to one little thing, chance. It is the chance mutation of one gene that happens every, I don't know, millions of times, that takes one organism to another one. It is a leap. It's not a continuous way. You know, before Homo sapiens sapiens, there were so many other forms of human being. Homo neanderthalis, Homo africanus, so many. They all failed because they had not the right genes to be able to survive. So even our own being, what we are, is the result of chance, and certainly not of a non-existent God. Unless you want to be far-sighted, and you say that after all, God is chance. And you say that chance is the cause of everything. It's okay with me, you can use it any other word. As long as you do not use an extra natural cause that has absolutely no consistent basis. Call it chance if you want. For me it's okay, but not God. And chance with a small c, not with a capital C, just as God. Small g, not a capital G. Any other, I apologize if I have offended anybody's sensibilities, but that is my opinion, I don't say that it is the truth. I'm just expressing my own opinion, which might be completely wrong. Being an anarchist, I accept this.
Why are you so interested in Duchamp?
Well, Arturo sparked my interest as a young student. But I want to, I'll answer that question in a second, but I don't want to run out of time. Sitting in this exhibition, I cannot help but ask you, did you and Duchamp ever discuss Picasso?
I will tell you one thing, I'm surprised at this association. What I can tell you is that Duchamp had a great admiration for Picasso, and in the book of the Maria Reynolds collection, when he spoke about Picasso, he did it in very elogiative terms. I don't think that Picasso ever knew Duchamp. What I can tell you is that they never met. Duchamp was very close to Brancusi, but not to Picasso. They may have met. I don't want to say something that I'm not sure of. But as far as I have known Duchamp, the work of Picasso did not interest him at all. He recognized his greatness as an artist, as a pioneer, but it was not his interest. He was interested in the conceptual aspect of art. And what is symptomatic is that after the war, this Second World War, most of the movements that came, that were born, always refer to Duchamp and never to Picasso. The very short period that in Italian art, for instance, is called oltre Guernica, that is to say after Guernica, were short-lived, 2 or 3 years. People were interested in Duchamp's concepts, in Duchamp's play of words, in art, for instance, the art and language, in the body art, of which he was the first exponent, in cynetic art, of which he was the first exponent, and in so many aspects of Duchamp's activities that after the war influenced 99% of the movement that came after him, while none of them were influenced by Picasso, except the very short period right after the war, when the scars were so deep that one felt that social commitment, like the masterpiece of Picasso, Guernica, should be followed. But it was very short-lived. As the border, but you know, the border is artificial. I have to say one thing. The large glass was transported from Dreyer's apartment to Philadelphia by putting the 2 glasses one on top of the other, and they were broken in 1,000 pieces, so they had to be repaired. And when you see the glass in Philadelphia, you see all the cracks. They were put together by the borders. The border is something that came afterwards. It has nothing to do with the original large glass, which when it was done had no border. There were 2 plates of glass superimposed.
I'm referring to what Linda, for example, calls it by sky.
Well, you know, there are so many interpretations. I prefer not to discuss them.
So they are bullshit then?
No, I don't say they are bullshit. They are interpretations. If you have read Freud's interpretation of dreams, you know how varied a dream can be interpreted. If you read Jung, you will give a Jungian interpretation. If you read Freud, you will give a Freudian interpretation. If you take Ulfrinde, it will be his interpretation. I don't say it's right or wrong. It's his interpretation, full stop. But it has nothing to do with the elaboration of the large glass. The large glass was elaborated without any frame. It was 2 pieces of glass superimposed and held together. During the transport, they were broken into 1,000 pieces and to be reconstructed, because Duchamp did not want to repeat himself, they were clamped to a new frame. These are the facts. I discuss facts, I don't discuss interpretations.
Thank you for coming here and give you a big applause. We have our 50th anniversary, and if you have missed seeing the big glass, you could walk in here.
As you can see,
I'm here.
a very nice interpretation of Ulfrinde, whom I want to salute here because he was really a very faithful interpreter of Marcel's work and dedicated a lot of his time to study Marcel Duchamp. Ulfrinde I've known for many, many years, and when I did the first catalogue of the exhibition of Marcel Duchamp, he was invited to contribute the most interesting introduction to the catalogue. So please give my warmest regards and warmest esteem to Ulfrinde. I tip my hat also to him.